Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. Hello, Jamie. How is it going, sister?
Going okay, thank you. Very
Good.
interested in this topic we're doing today.
Oh, I know, me too. Today, we're diving into a topic that every single one of us has faced. Why do we still mess up on our recovery journey, even when we're doing everything right? You've meal prepped, you've journaled, you've meditated, you've blocked off time, planned for a trigger, and somehow you still find yourself face first in a bag of something ultra processed. So, we're going to get real about why this happens, what the science says, what it feels like, and how we can move forward without letting it turn into this shame spiral. Jamie, when you hear that scenario, someone is doing everything right in air quotes, but still ends up like in the chips or the cookies, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you? Is it like this science thing or is it an emotional thing?
Um, I would say it's again, um, I used to think it was a me thing, it was a shame thing, it was something was
Hmm.
wrong with me thing, it was all those things. And now I know that it's way bigger than that. It's a lot of science, it's a lot of, neuroscience. It's a lot of, our bodies doing exactly what they were designed to do in reaction to ultra processed foods. And it's a lot of the inner family and unhealed childhood wounds and false beliefs and all of those things. So I think that once people, again, there's things out of our control and there's things in our control. So I'm going to kind of parse those out.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I always have an automatic response when where are we with our basics? I
Mhm.
always start with those first things to flush out the simple stuff. And 9 out of 10 times, there usually is something amiss with our food, our sleep, our movement, our spirituality. Those are our four cornerstones that we built real food recovery on. But I also know, like you've just mentioned, life can get very lifey at times, and we are humans with humans' emotions. So you have to make room for that. And sometimes life does just get bigger than we are. We had interviewed Judd Brewer several months ago. He was a wonderful guest, and he was talking about sometimes people just get a case of the effets, and that's what I like to refer to as when life gets lifey. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's just bigger, and you have to go, okay, I can't do this right now.
Yep.
So let's start with the science. I love that part. We're nerdy that way here at Real Food Recovery because it's not that you're weak or lazy, it's that your brain is doing exactly what it's wired to do, is exactly what Jamie had mentioned. So let's talk about a few of those. Jamie, you want to start out?
Yeah. So the first one is the habit loop, which is essentially breaking this down. It's cue to craving to response to reward. So think about it as, what drives a habit. Any habit any of us have. It's a cue, and the cue could be something external, could be something internal. It could be something, and I say external, it could be the environment, it could be a smell, it could be a sight, it could be someone's, something we hear, something someone says to us.
Mm-hmm.
Craving, of course, we're all familiar with those. Response is what we do with the craving, and the reward is what we receive from that response. And it could be the reward could be delayed, it could be immediate, it could be something where it's chemical and it's in our brains. We don't even know we're experiencing it, or it could be physical. We do know we're experiencing it, and everything in between.
Yeah.
And again, if we think about this, is all around brain science and brain neuroplasticity and the actual functioning of the brain, which means the grooves that are grooved, right? This is why a friend of mine always says, "Don't start a habit. You don't start a habit, you'll have to break,"
You're right.
because this and Paige is going to go into this. It's the whole idea of once those grooves get grooved in their brain, they always stay there.
Yeah.
So and you can write new ones, but they're
Yeah.
not as deep as the first one. So you could have always the option of going back. That's why if we think about the habit loop, create good habits for yourself.
hmm hmm Yeah, very well said. And the next one is still, when we're talking about this brain science, we've got two parts of our brain, this prefrontal cortex, which is right up between the eyeballs, and then the limbic system, which is more towards the back of our brain, the center brain. And when you're stressed out or tired, that rational part of the brain kind of takes a back seat to what's going on in the emotional or the limbic part of the brain. That is the stronger driver at that time when emotions are very high, which is why we focus so much time on impulse control in our recovery program. So we can redirect that blood flow back to this prefrontal cortex that holds that rational thought. The consequences, our long term consequences, our braking system, that is so critical and almost do you agree when I say that's almost like the key to recovery is learning to do that impulse control? I mean, I just think
Yes.
it is that huge. And then we just keep making edits to find out which of the tools are the most effective and the most powerful in our toolbox when it comes to impulse control. And we only find that out through practice, through
Well, so
trying things on for size.
yes, but I really want to, words are a big deal to me. The economy of words, impulse control, that idea of impulse. It people will tend to think that it's, oh, well, it's an impulse and it's controlling me. But if you look back at the habit loop, right, it's a response.
Yeah.
Impulses are just responses. They're just
Mhm.
pre-wired, deeply wired responses that we're used to
Mhm.
making. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean that it's the forever response. So it's
Mhm.
important to discern that an impulse is like, we tend to, at least I always thought of an impulse as something that's done to me, right? Like I don't control it. And yes, in some ways, but if you think about the way our brains work, you can say, okay, that was my impulse before, but now coming from a place of power and I'm going to choose something different. And if you think about response is calm, it's planful, you're present, you're not just acting out of impulse, right? So if you think about responding instead of acting impulsively, it
Mhm.
really changes. I think it empowers a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree.
The next one is dopamine hijack. Ultra processed foods release massive amounts of dopamine, and
Mhm.
repeated exposure actually wires your brain to crave that dopamine hit.
Yeah.
So it's like, a lot of times, and the dopamine is that released is from these foods is so extreme compared to single ingredient foods, unprocessed foods. The
Mhm.
dopamine release that processed foods give you is so extreme compared to regular food that great grandparents would have seen as food, that we don't even know, our brains don't even know how to, it feels like a drip, as you've said before, versus like a total wash of dopamine. And,
Mhm.
when your brain gets used to always getting that hit of a neurotransmitter in that amount, you seek that hit.
Mhm.
So, and you don't even, it's subconscious. We don't even know we're doing it. We don't understand the science of it. We just think there's something wrong with me. I can't resist these ultra processed chips or these ultra processed, packaged junk food. There's something wrong with me.
Mhm.
You're acting exactly the way that you were supposed to when they designed
Mhm.
the food.
Mhm. You were talking about being kind of like a wordsmith, and words are important to you. And I love the wording repeated exposure because I think so strongly that that is where the majority of my addiction came from, just that repeated exposure. And I loved it from my first lick, bite, smell, sight, all of it. I knew I loved that. And from the time you're born, you just get this repeated exposure over and over and over again. And then you're building up those patterns, exactly like you said. And some people, you had mentioned earlier about interfamily relationships and things like that, that can be a big addition
Driver.
to driver for addiction. But for me, I think my biggest driver was my brain lit up like a Christmas tree from my earliest memory when I had it, and then I kept seeking it because I loved it so much. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I want to unpack that a little bit more because I want to
Please.
find, and we can come back to it because I know we're going to touch back on that. But I want to rewind the tape a little further back, right? You mentioned what happens when you eat the food, but what I have learned in recovery is to understand what's happening to get me to want the food.
Hmm.
That's where the power, that's where the change can happen.
Hmm.
Because you're right. The minute that most of us have these highly dopaminergic foods, we respond with bells and whistles and lights up
Yeah.
in the brain.
Yeah.
It's what's taking you to the food that's the issue. And once you get there, you're able to say, okay, like, am I in a place where where I'm not escaping from what's taking me to the food? And if that's a yes, then you can be present with the food and you can say, oh, this was good, but I don't need more of it. Or this was good.
Yeah.
It's too sweet. Or this was good. And I'm hungry 5 minutes later. Why would I want to eat that again? Right. You're able to be more present. But if you don't, and this is true for all of us, this is not just a Paige thing or a Jamie thing. This is every human on the planet. If we don't understand what's bringing us to the attempt to escape with a substance of any kind, including food, that's where most of us fall. We think, oh,
Yeah.
it's the food, it's the drug, it's the alcohol. It's
Hmm.
not. It's what's happening before.
I love that you explained that a little further because for me, what you've just explained is the recovery process. I
Yes.
was never there. You know, as a child, I didn't think like that. I just knew I
I get it.
wanted more.
None of
Why
us did.
wouldn't I? You know?
None of us did.
And
Yep.
it wasn't till my menopause years that I'm like, oh wow, my body is completely changing, and it forced me to take a deeper look. I mean, I'm not proud that I wasn't more mature about that deeper level thinking earlier. I just wasn't. And so
Yeah, that's
yeah.
where you were.
Hmm.
No shame here.
I love the other topic about neuroplasticity, and one of the things that I just am so grateful to our human bodies and our creator for making our brains neuroplastic, which is a fancy way of saying that we can rewire. Our brains
Mhm.
are malleable. We can change things. We can rewire these addictive pathways. Jamie was talking about neural grooves in our brain. We can literally change those as we work on healing. So, if you think about this, healing the brain pathways from years of addiction to hyperpalatable food, that does not happen overnight. Just for those of you that learn to play the piano or you drive a certain way to work or things like that, it is grooved into your brain one way. But just like they got grooved that way, we can also ungroove or rewire our brain to reach for things that are not hyperpalatable. We can rewire for new, Jamie was talking about habits earlier, and as we get new habits, it will literally rewire your brain as you create these new healthy habits with repetition. So I'm just very grateful that our brains are neuroplastic, and I just think that's such a gift to us. And not only that, it's just so interesting to see how forgiving our body can be when we start treating it the way it was designed to be treated.
Yeah, and this is neuroplasticity is a gift. I agree. And this is where, on RFR, I think one of the beautiful things, many beautiful things about RFR, but one of them is this diverse, ways of thinking. And even when we host with our community, it's a very, we bring a lot of diverse perspectives. Paige Paige has a different perspective around, food addiction than I do. And I think for me, when I hear anyone, myself included, thinking, "Oh, it's this food that's getting me this response," I remind myself, well, again, what's taking me to seek something like food to give me peace and comfort, ease and comfort, right?
Hmm.
What is going on inside of me that I need to distract myself by putting any food in my mouth? And
Hmm.
and when we are stressed, you just said, Paige, we're going to, if it's available to us and we have repetitive motions with it, we're going to choose those hyperpalatable foods.
Hmm.
And they're not, we would continuously react to those hyperpalatable foods because that's how they're designed to respond in our bodies.
Hmm.
And it's so again, it's about, for me, being present before the food is ever consumed.
Hmm.
Because then I can say, you know what? This apple is not going to scratch this itch because it's not about food.
Mm-hmm.
My itch can't be scratched with an apple or an Oreo or a
Mm-hmm.
pizza or, kale juice. Like, it cannot be scratched with putting anything in my body. I
Mm-hmm.
have to sit down and do the work with, my inner family, some of my old beliefs, that like really do the work, feel the feelings, allow it to work through us. That's where the beauty is, because that's where the rewiring can happen. So that when we get to a place where we're like, God, I just want to, a cookie, or I just want to eat something. I'm just going to go grab a bag of carrots. If you're eating, and I've done it, you're eating a bag of carrots like somebody's holding a gun to your head, there's a problem. It's not about the carrots. It's not, it might as well be Oreos at that point.
Yeah.
It's what is going on that leads you into thinking that putting something in your body is the solution.
I had an extraordinarily stressful event on Friday, and I had a sidestep like I haven't had in a while. And I was face forward into these high sugary things
Mhm.
and eating them like I was a maniac who was never going to have another morsel again. And I'm like, even while it's happening, I'm like, what are you doing? Why is this happening? And I do know why, but I was so frustrated with myself that I did respond that way in this extreme stress. I would have liked to said, "Oh, I had this extreme stress and I just sailed right through it." But no, I had a sidestep there for a minute.
Yeah,
Luckily,
I
I
get
was
it.
able to get right back on the next day. Of course, I felt terrible. My stomach hurt, my head hurt. I mean, I felt miserable all over, but it was, one of those high-pitched, stressful events that you don't see coming, that right hook that you don't see coming. And
Yeah.
this is this still
So
happens.
Oh, totally. And Paige and I, guys, Paige and I could go on probably a whole separate podcast, like a whole separate podcast with multiple episodes about all the things that we've lived through in the last, we're 2.5 years old.
Yeah.
RFR is 2.5 years old. Paige and I
Hmm.
could have a whole other podcast about
Hmm.
why we have RFR, when we talk about all the things we've lived through
Hmm.
and frankly have lived through in the last 2.5 years.
Hmm.
Both of us have
Hmm.
had major life events, major
Yeah.
stressors that have affected us. Um, and guess what? And this is Paige, this is what your example was, a perfect example of what I'm referring to
Yeah.
is, when we see that, so we get to the point where the food, we can't stop ourselves from consuming that
Yeah.
food. That's, you're right. You can't. I can't. I wouldn't have
Yeah.
been able to.
Hmm.
But what could have changed, what could still change for you, and as you progress in your recovery and you continue and growing in your recovery, what could change for you is the thoughts and beliefs you have before you ever get to, I want to put my face,
Yeah.
into the sugar again.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. And we're actually going to get into that a little bit
Yeah.
more because I really want to talk about that more. And one thing I'm going to let you talk here in just a minute, but one thing I will share is just a couple days ago, I had one of our members contact me, and she was having an event that she handled, she thought very well. And she said, I just have to tell you, I'm so grateful to you and Jamie for creating RFR and this program, this holistic look at recovery, where so many programs just focus on here's your food plan and here's the single ingredient foods, and we're just going to talk about what you did and didn't eat. But
Right.
how we get into the things that Jamie is talking about, the why behind what we're doing.
Yeah.
So anyway,
So, again, Paige's description was beautiful. Even when we're doing all the things, if the trigger is strong enough, if
yeah,
our stress load is high enough, and we don't have other tools on board, we need to add that. And it doesn't, this is not a judgment, guys. This is picking up the right tool and having a expanded tool belt.
hmm,
That's all neuroplasticity too.
yeah,
Remembering that we have other tools besides food is a whole other neural pathway that we need to keep
hmm,
moving.
I
Okay.
love that.
So when the trap door opens, right, and you're back in the old habit of using food for comfort, before you even realize it, right? When that trap door opens and you find yourself back in it, what's the very first thing that you do to get yourself back on track? If
Yeah,
you do go through that door.
Yeah, and I'm so glad we're talking about this because I want to talk about both ways. I want to talk about what we do to get ourselves back on track, and then when we're done, we're going to talk about what happens when the train leaves the station
Yeah.
because this doesn't always work. But when I try my best to stop it, there's a moment in there where you still do have the power to stop it. So there's two things that I do. First of all, I just freeze and just I let it, I feel it in my chest. It's uncomfortable, and that has taken a lot of practice to be willing to just feel the gripping in my chest and I just let it move through me because if I don't resist it, it will kind of shake on through. That's one. And the other thing is my self-talk, whether it's the hands on the cheek saying, "You're okay, you're okay, you're okay," or things like, "This is going to pass in a moment. You're not hungry. You're just needing comfort," which is the truth. And I really think that when you're telling your brain the truth, it responds so nicely because it recognizes truth when it hears it. And most of the time for me, that works. But I've also had moments that lately, like I said, where life was bigger than me and sidesteps occur, but I try with all my might to course correct right after. Jamie, I'm curious about you, what you do to stop it when it first starts. And I also am curious to know, I have that aura coming on where I literally feel like aura washing over me. I'm curious if you have that addictive fog that kind of starts coming on. Like have heard people that have epilepsy that they get this aura right before a seizure. Do you have anything that kind of comes on that triggers you, that you have gives you an extra moment to say, okay, all hands on deck here. I need to implement my pause techniques.
Um, so when you say aura, can you describe like, is it the aura that comes over you when you start eating the food, or is it before?
Right before I feel it coming. I feel like that there's something that's building, welling up in me, and I start floating above myself. And it's almost like a panic that I've got to get to. It's usually sugar for me. I've got it. There's nothing in the room that can stop me from getting there. You're losing that rational thought. You've said it before where you like check out. That your brain goes offline and you're checking out of life and you've got a driver like your vision almost goes blurry to everything else in the room.
Yeah. So again, that sounds like what I've heard psychologists refer to as flooding,
Yeah.
where you're just,
Yes.
flooding from head to toe or
Yep.
sometimes from toe to head
Mm-hmm.
with, overwhelm, emotion, cortisol.
Mm-hmm.
It feels very hot, very, like you feel the
Mm-hmm.
energy flowing upwards or downwards in your body. Um, so when that happens, the specifics there are really all around, again, stopping and pausing. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, I sit down or I move my body and ask myself, what's going on here?
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Yeah.
And then I'm able to get answers or at least get information and feedback. It is practice, guys. It is not always something I'm
Right.
easily able to do. Um, but if I'm to a point where I'm so flooded that I'm on autopilot about something, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like going to a cabinet or going to a refrigerator, um, I probably missed 14 things before that that were much more manageable for me to
Oh, good
dissect so
point.
that I never got to
Yeah,
that point where I'm on autopilot. Now, at the beginning of recovery, though, I had never dissected anything. So I always had like 15 things backing me up. So if some three more things piled on, I was like, I'm out.
done.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm in the pantry now. Call me
Yeah.
later. Like,
Mm.
but that was that's that. But again, when you're able to unpack the stuff before it gets to a point where no human being could handle it well, without using something to distract themselves or
Yeah.
numb themselves or pleasure themselves, right? Because food is pleasure.
Yeah.
That is why, again, I think there's why we focus in RFR on all of our branches of recovery because it's not
Mm.
just about the food.
Right. Right. And that was going to be my follow-up question to you if you wanted to share a time on the opposite end of the spectrum where you were doing everything right and something still happened.
So again, um, and I question, what do I mean when I'm doing everything right?
Yeah.
Right? Because that I just have a whole, and Paige and I talk about this a lot. I have a whole different belief system around what I'm doing versus what God is doing for me. I have a different, and this has come with years of recovery. I have a different belief system about what's in my control and what's not. And that's why we talk about like the things externally, they're not in our control, and the things internally that are. So when I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling like I'm doing everything right, what right for me on a Tuesday might not be right for me on that following Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
Right for me in the morning might be wrong in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a phrase that implies that, and it also implies that I'm in control of it all, and I'm really not,
Yeah.
because I can't control the universe and the
Yeah.
world around me and anything outside of my fingertips or toes. So
Mm-hmm.
when I get to the point of, have I done it right, which is a valid question that so many people ask themselves, and I've asked myself, it's, what does right look like for me? What do I need to set myself up for with, regarding success,
Mm-hmm.
for success in the day, in the week?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So for Paige, it looks like, she's talked about this a lot, food prep and having the meals
Mm-hmm.
ready. For me, I've had periods like that for sure, years of food prepped and all of that to grab and go. And I'm back in those habits here in this phase of life. But in those moments that you don't have things ready to grab and go, and you do the best you can in the moment, you keep the real high trigger foods out of your environment,
Mm-hmm.
and you do the work before it gets to a point where you're sticking your head in the fridge.
Yeah, and I agree. Very well said. And you know how we were talking a minute ago about how I was describing that feeling that washes over me kind of as an aura or a cloud of addictive fairy
Mhm.
dust dripping all over me. Do you experience any of that where you're completely floating above yourself, disconnected from your body? Do you not have anything that washes over you right before? I'm just curious
That's
if you
it's a trauma response. It's a disassociation trauma
Oh,
response.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then and don't get me, yes, I've been there. And I also know that it happens with hopefully for most of us, it's a very infrequent, right?
Right.
Handful of times
Yeah.
in a lifetime. But sometimes it's not, and we have to be honest with ourselves about what we can handle and what we can't,
Mm-hmm.
we're taking on and what we're letting go.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're always having an experience, or often having an experience of disassociation, which is what you're describing,
Yeah.
there's bigger fish to fry underneath the surface.
Right. And that's why I wanted to bring this point up because, well, two reasons. I wanted people to understand there's nothing to feel bad about, and this
No,
was totally normal to
no,
have that signal, that sign coming on. When I get in the car and I have to drive to Colorado, I usually have to really fight that because I know I've got 7 or 8 hours in the car, and I know this sounds dramatic, but it is a trauma response of I'm highly ADD and I'm going to be strapped down here and the anxiety is through the roof and I have to fight that nervous hunger. I mean, I think of it as nervous hunger, but I mean, really, it's my anxiety. I'm ready to crawl out of my skin. So there, I did want to help people identify what was going on. That was my other reason for
mhm,
wanting to bring that up. And the other thing that if we can just spend one more minute on, is that pause where it feels like, and I'm curious what Jamie has to say, that there is a pause right before you go off the cliff that you can still turn things around. Once I get to a certain point, there is no turning back. I've already mentioned that. So I'm curious what Jamie will say if she feels like there's always opportunity for a pause before it gets too far. And
yes,
yeah. And
absolutely, absolutely, there's always an opportunity. And that's why doing the doing the work of the daily work of setting yourself up for good a good day, so that you're in an emotionally as emotionally serene place as you can be is the way to
Yeah.
go, so that when you do have something, really overwhelming happen, you're like, okay, like I
Right.
have some savings in my emotional bank
Yes. Well put.
that I can draw from.
Mm-hmm.
But
Love that.
if you're always running on empty, right, which
Mhm.
many people who don't have these tools in recovery, or haven't used the tools in recovery that often to make them automatic, they will just go back to their old stuff, which
Yeah.
is food, or
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
case.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk for just a minute about when we do have those side steps and what that looks like afterwards, specifically our thoughts. What are those thoughts afterwards? For me, I actually feel exhausted, like I've run an emotional marathon, and I still feel a little disconnected from myself somewhat, which I think is a protective mechanism that I have just to keep the guilt and shame at bay, where I can start processing why did all this happen. And this is just my personal experience. And then I have to start really talking to myself. I mean, really talking to myself to keep myself from starting on that extreme thought tangent of things like, okay, I'm not going to eat again at all for the next 24 hours, and I'm going to double up, and I'm just going to flood my body with water, and maybe I'll do an extra workout, something like that. I have to work very hard after to bring myself back into that calm state. And I was wondering what you had to say about that. If when you've had a sidestep, what is your emotional status like? What's your thought process like to bring yourself back to equilibrium?
Just again, lots of water, deep breathing, changing my routine, having, those outreach opportunities to friends, to fellow
Mm-hmm.
travelers, as I call them,
Mm-hmm.
getting on a virtual or in-person meeting, um, getting out in nature. I mean, the 100 tools. But again,
Yeah.
the other thing is, journaling is another good one. But the opportunity here is, what can we do? Can we do some of those things regularly before we have the sidestep, so that we don't
Mm-hmm.
have, or we
Mm-hmm.
have fewer sidesteps,
Mm-hmm.
or we know what to do to unclog the drain so we don't have a
Yeah.
sidestep.
Yeah, and I think this is important because what we're trying to avoid is absolutely beating ourselves up
That's right.
afterwards,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
Because I really want to have a moment to focus on where compassion fits into this journey. It may be, some people say it's the most important piece of the recovery journey, but it does take practice, I have found, and it takes, like I said, a couple days for me to adjust and get back to a better headspace when I've had, one of these big side steps because it's very uncomfortable. I feel like I've got a brain bruise afterwards. So, my answer for how do I get back to compassion is I just start falling back into my normal recovery patterns. Jamie's kind of mentioned that. Do you
Mhm.
have anything that you want to share around how can you easily reach for compassion without beating yourself up when we do have
That's
these
the inner
sides?
family work. That's the So I was at a meeting on Saturday morning, and one of my fellow travelers was saying, like, she was in the pantry. She was looking for something. And she's like, and she's of the belief that there are no bad foods that are off limits.
Oh,
And I
mhm,
and I have similar beliefs. So, at this stage of my recovery. And but I have guardrails, right? And I have guidelines. There are foods that
mhm,
I will not bring into the house because I don't need to be in my house. But if I'm
mhm.
out and it's something, amazing or whatever, and I'm in a place to enjoy it mindfully, that's a different story. And there was a period where it was in my house, right? So again, we have to kind of be malleable and know that what works for us one day may not work for us the next day, or what worked for us
Totally.
for a while, we don't want to you do anymore. Because in my case, my body started hurting, and I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want my body to hurt.
Mhm,
I wasn't binging, I wasn't
mhm,
overeating, but I don't want my body to hurt. So I'm
mhm,
like, all right. Now, so again, it's knowing yourself, it's asking yourself these vital questions. The other thing that she mentioned that I loved, she's in the food, right? She's wanting the food.
Mm-hmm.
And she realized that it was a part of her. It was an inner family member that was, crying for attention. And that's what this inner family member, when she was 6, would do. She would go and get a piece of candy from her grandmother. And so she was wanting something sweet. And she realized it was the inner family member. So she realized that, what was happening. She started getting curious with herself, asking herself questions, and having a sort of a conversation, an internal conversation with this little girl part of her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Asking her, why do you think something sweet's going to solve this problem?
Yeah.
And,
Mm-hmm.
listen to what they tell you. They're telling you the answer for that little inner child was because uh, grandma was safe. Grandma was love. Grandma was comfort. So I equate, going to get candy was something she always gave me when I was sad or cried. And
Mm-hmm.
so therefore, when I'm sad, I get comfort from something sweet, but you're not getting comfort from the candy. You're getting comfort from the attention and love that grandma was giving you.
Mm-hmm.
Now let me give you attention and love. And
Mm-hmm.
sure enough, she did that. She stepped out of the pantry. She never had a thing.
Oh, wow. That's
So that's what
remarkable.
I mean. Like there's so much to do before we ever get to that point of our
Yeah.
hand in the
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into another topic about how our recovery process changes over time, right? Because
Yes.
when you
Yes.
very first started, it looks a lot different than Jamie. I think you said you're 18 years into recovery now. But yeah,
2008. So no, not quite 18.
okay. So do you want to say anything about where you started to where you are now, how you measure growth in your
I
recovery process?
measure, good question. I measure growth and how quickly I'm able to get myself back to homeostasis.
Yeah, that's kind of how I
It's
feel too.
it's not about if I ate the food or didn't eat the food,
Mm-hmm.
because that's for me, it depends where I am in my life.
Yeah.
There was a time not that long ago when I had the food in the house and I hadn't had the food in the house for years.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought having the food in the house is the better choice I can make compared to other choices I wanted to make in that moment. Right.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
So,
I
and
get it.
then, yeah. So it's like knowing ourselves enough to say, I'm doing the best I can. I
Yeah.
have this stuff around,
Mm-hmm.
or I had a sidestep and I'm doing this the best I can.
Yeah.
Both things can be true.
Yeah.
Both things can
No,
be true, PS.
yeah. Mm-hmm. I love that. And maybe we can end with this question of, so we will all experience side steps in our life. It kind of in answer to our question about this podcast, and it's just using the tools to redirect and get us back on track, which is where we can put the emphasis with compassion on the journey. So I really want to end on this last big talking point before we get into listener questions, because so many people feel like they're back at zero after having a moment like that. And I people have to really fight with this, and it breaks my heart that they feel like, okay, I've undone everything I've ever done. What you want to say something to the people listening that feel like they're back at the beginning after a sidestep?
And I remember those days. I remember those days.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that is programming from, I think, it's programming from society. It's programming from like legalistic black and white thinking.
Mm-hmm.
It's some recovery programs promote this. There's a
Mm-hmm.
12-step recovery program that I am not
Mm-hmm.
a fan of that promotes this. And they actually punish their members when they have these side steps or lapses, and they
Uh,
make them start their days of counting again. They make them
mm-hmm.
they stay quiet in meetings because
Mm-hmm.
they've lost their privilege. I mean, it's insane.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that aside, I'm done with my rant. Um, look, what was the question?
What would you say to someone who says, I'm back at ground zero?
Oh yeah. Uh you have been given, or you have given yourself, if you want to look at it either way, a beautiful opportunity to learn. A
Yeah.
beautiful opportunity to do something, to learn something new about yourself,
Hmm.
about your stress tolerance level,
Yeah.
about that human being, that, whatever, that
Hmm.
relationship, that situation, that,
Hmm.
whatever. You've
Hmm.
given yourself a beautiful opportunity. And now look, you have something new that you've learned. Like
Yeah.
there's no shame.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And leading right into what we want to touch on is tools because we know that slips happen. It's not about perfection, it's about how you respond. And if you can get curious, like Jamie was just saying, it really does a good job of wiping out the shame. And it's such a
Yes.
loving way to respond, which,
Mhm.
as Jamie just said, that's where the growth happens. So let's just zip through a few tool ideas that can help us when we're in these situations.
Yeah, like the pause, the power of the pause, the pause, the pause, the
Mhm.
pause, the pause, the pause. 1,000 times a day, pause.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I just had something before we recorded with my elder family member, and somebody else was getting involved with something, and it was like egregious what this other person was doing. And I was like, getting the text messages from my other family member about what this third party was doing. And I was like, I am going, like, I could feel the flooding happening. And I
Yeah.
was like, stop, breathe, can't
Hmm.
control them, can't control that, can't control any of this. Like, breathe.
Yeah.
So that's the pause.
Yeah. It's like the most powerful tool you can
Yes.
ever develop.
Paige
Uh,
taught me a lot about that. You did, because you would tell me how you would sleep on decisions. You would
oh
like
yeah.
sleep on them 2, 3 days. I have
Yes.
started to adopt that habit. If
Hmm.
if there's something that I think I need to do, I sleep on it a couple of days. If there's
Hmm.
something that I really want, like, like there was a new gym I was thinking, not new, but new to me, gym that I was thinking of joining. I slept on it for like a week and said, is this really the right thing for me? It wasn't a money thing. It was a, do I want to put myself in this environment thing? And I had to like stop and pause. Sometimes the pause, guys, can be days.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a rush. It's
Thank
not a
you to
race.
Paige for that.
No, I had to
True.
learn that through the School of Hard Knocks. 2 to 3 days is usually what it takes me to process. By the way, did you join the gym?
Yes, I did. And it's
Oh,
great.
good. Oh,
It's great.
good. I love that for you.
Yeah.
Another tool is journal prompts, which we've talked about this a little bit, but it's just the self-questioning. I think the most powerful question we can ask is, what do you need right now? And it forces you to look a little deeper and be a little more introspective because I don't think we always know in the moment, but sometimes you have to look and it's just a few layers back of what you're needing. But it's generally comfort in some form, but
Yes.
recognizing that is a very powerful tool.
Yes. Again, nervous system regulation, that breathing. Some people do tapping. I'm not a fan of the tapping. I think it's there's other ways to achieve it, right? You can just sit there, and it's really all about bringing yourself into the present.
Mhm.
So again, Paige, what's the next one?
I think forgiving yourself quickly, which by the way, that does take a little bit of effort for me
Mhm.
because I just get so frustrated. Come on, man, get it together. I have to work on not talking that way and talking in a loving way of
Yes.
and reminding myself that slipping does not erase all the work I've done because that is a place where my brain can very easily go as
Yes.
well.
Yes. Last one is reminding yourself that, progress, it's progress that you're making. There's no perfection. There's no good, bad. There's no black, white. There's no on, off. It's
Hmm.
just progress. Like, and sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And sometimes it's 3 forward, 4 back. And that's just life. You're doing, think about how well you're doing by the fact that you're even noticing how many steps forward and back. Like
Totally.
most people are totally brain dead to all of that.
Totally.
They don't look at
Totally.
that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Mindset shift work is just incredibly powerful. We
Yeah.
did a podcast a couple years ago where we talked about dashboard lights. Jamie had written that podcast and it was so powerful. And it's how they're really just signals indicator that something in our recovery needs attention. You know, those big foam fingers at the basketball games that, they're pointing the direction they need to go. But one choice, one slip doesn't erase all the progress you've made. Instead, it shows us exactly where more healing or support might be needed. So it's not about guilt or shame, it's about noticing, learning, and adjusting. Um, I'm curious about this, Jamie. When you see one of those dashboard lights pop up in your own recovery, what does it usually reveal for you. Is there like a typical common cause when those dashboard lights come on that it's pretty congruent of this is what I know, this is what's gonna be the cause of it? For me, I do think it's that nervous system being overly activated, and anxiety is usually my problem. I didn't know if you had like a typical one that you have to watch out for.
Yeah, it could be anxiety, but for me, it's have I set myself up for the day to handle my anxiety
Mm,
baseline so that I'm not
mm-hmm.
already elevated and then I can't take on more.
Yeah, I like that.
It's kind of stopgap, if you will. And
Hmm.
I'm far from perfect at it, PS, but I'm making progress.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
when I do that, I take the time to do that, especially in stressful life situations or life seasons, and I'm living it now. It is constant stress from 4 or 5 different directions, constant. And I have to remind myself that, um, I have like, it is critical for me to set myself up first thing in the morning with some self-care. It might look like a workout, it might look like a walk, it might look like journaling, it might look like prayer time or breathing, but I have to do those things in the morning so
Hmm.
that
Agree.
I'm calmer when the other stuff gets thrown at me.
Totally agree. Very, very wise. I love that. Do you have time to do a few lightning rounds of listener questions?
I've got 5 minutes.
Okay. Let's speed through as many as we can. There's some few good ones in here that people sent in.
Yes. Why do I feel worse when I slip now than I used to before recovery? I'm confused. Uh, you may, first of all, the best thing I could tell you is something that was told to me by my dietitian that I started with years ago, 2008. And she told me like immediately, because I was like, oh, I ate whatever. I ate the cake. I had the cookie, whatever it was when I was working with her back then. And she would say, let it go. And I was like, what?
What?
She said, let it go. She's like, and I was like, well, what do you mean? Like I'm not gay. I was all the things. And she's like, yeah, let it go. Move on. What's your plan
Hmm.
today? Like she didn't even blink
Hmm.
an eye. She
Hmm.
didn't even blink an eye. She's like, I don't care. I was like, but how could you not care? She's like, because relapse is part of recovery. It's everywhere around us. It's socialized in our life. It's literally being advertised to us. It's being force fed to
Hmm.
our children. It's being advertised everywhere you go. She's like, how would
Hmm.
I ever expect anyone to stand up to it? Or
Hmm.
avoid it. She's like, I just need you to know what to do when you do have it so that you can get back on track. That's it.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
it. So that's my advice for you. You feel
Yeah.
worse. That's your own old, maybe some old beliefs, old shame, maybe because you really really liked how you felt when you were on your progress plan towards your recovery goals. That's all normal, all
Hmm.
normal. But now you have the option to say, okay, like I had a great learning opportunity. I learned that I don't like the way I feel when I eat those foods or do those behaviors that don't align with my recovery.
Hmm.
That's it.
I love that. Another one that we get actually a lot. I hear I shouldn't restrict after a binge to compensate, but I've never heard why. It seems like it would be the right logical thing to do. I get it. And that's where most people's brains go to. Totally understandable. But that is the diet mentality, and it's an addictive thought. And here's why it never works, because restriction leads to more binge behavior. So just return to real, nourishing food as your anchor. And as Jamie said, let it go and just get back to normal patterns as
Yeah.
soon as possible.
Yeah. Paige, do you mind if I ask this last question or answer this
Sure,
last question? It's one of yours, but
sure,
I really love it. It's can I ever
sure,
trust myself around trigger foods?
sure.
It seems like I'll never get there. I've never understood how people can pass up a dessert when it's offered. Great,
Hmm.
wonderful question. And I understand that thinking. I think Paige is, I'm sure you understand you've been there.
Yeah.
Everyone in recovery has. So that there's a couple things I used to think of these trigger foods as like, I need to stay away from them. They're kryptonite. Oh my gosh, I can't. And then I realized are what's triggering me about the food. If there's something to trigger, then I'm like, oh, wait, is there something to trigger? Well, probably. There's always something to trigger. So it's not about the food, it's about the trigger. So then I unpack what's happening to get me to a place where those foods could trigger me. And by the way, if it's environmental, like let's say it's a party or a dinner or a
Yeah.
family holiday, there are times when I will say, you know what, today I don't have it in me. I don't have it in me to go to that family dinner. I don't have it in me to go to that party. I'm not socially, or excuse me, emotionally available to be present at that party and not get into that stuff. Or I'm going to go to the family event after they're done with their meal or before they start their meal. Right. So there are times when I will step away from the food related behaviors that I know because I know that I haven't had a chance to do the work on the triggers. Okay. And it reminds me it's not about the food. So, yes, you will get there. You will get to a place in your recovery where the food doesn't trigger you because the triggers have been looked at and examined and you know what to do with them. Or if you haven't, because you're human and that's life on life's terms, you'll say, you know what? I got a lot of triggers today and I don't need to be around food. I don't need to be around something that I don't have the power today to stand up against.
Yeah. Well said. Perfect ending. And if you want to find out more about us, you can find us at realfoodrecoveryforyou.com. That's the number four and the letter U. And you can find our book on Amazon, Real Food Recovery. If food isn't the answer, what's the question? And we hope to see you next time. Great conversation, sister. Loved it.
Good. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.